The twin suns of Kralian burned high in the alien sky, casting long golden beams over the city of emerald spires. Humans were not welcome here, yet Commander Jack Ralston walked through the crowded market streets without fear. His presence drew suspicious eyes, but no one dared approach. The truce between Earth and Kralian was fragile, and his visit was supposed to be diplomatic, not dangerous. He was here to negotiate an end to the growing border raids, but deep inside, he knew something was wrong. The Kralian guards seemed restless, their hands hovering near their strange curved weapons. Whispers followed him, words in a language he did not yet understand, but the tone was sharp and filled with warning. Even the merchants looked at him. Like a storm was coming, Jack entered the palace courtyard, where fountains shimmered with liquid light. Standing there was Princess Lyrin, the green-skinned heir to the Kralian throne. Her golden eyes locked on him, narrowing as if she could see straight into his thoughts. She wore armor that glittered like living metal, and her voice carried the authority of someone used to obedience. "Human," she said slowly, "your kind has crossed lines you do not understand." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, noticing the faint glow beneath her skin and the steady rhythm of the pulse at her neck. She looked both beautiful and dangerous, like a weapon wrapped in silk. Jack had dealt with alien leaders before, but something about her made him uneasy. It was not just her power, it was the way she seemed to know something he didn't. She stepped closer, the scent of strange flowers following her. "You are in my world now," she said. "Every breath you take is because I allow it. Remember that, human." Her tone was cold, but her eyes lingered on him as if testing his courage. Jack felt his jaw tighten. He was not here to be intimidated, but he also knew one wrong move could end the talks before they began. They walked into the Hall of Councils, its ceiling alive with shifting patterns of green light. The Kralian elders sat in a half-circle, their faces unreadable. Jack began his speech about peace and trade, but he could feel the air thickening with tension. Lyrian's gaze never left him, and every time he mentioned human settlements, the elders' eyes flickered with anger. Something here was not just political, it was personal. When the meeting ended, Lyrin approached him again. In her hand was a clear glass bottle, filled with a shimmering red liquid. "This is sacred," she said softly. "It is part of me. No human must touch it." Jack raised an eyebrow, curious, but before he could reply, a guard whispered something in her ear that made her expression harden. She turned to leave, but the bottle remained in her hand, glowing in the light. Jack stood there, his instincts telling him that whatever was inside that bottle was the reason for her warnings. And something in him, the stubborn, reckless part, wanted to know why. He had faced wars, assassins, and alien storms, but this was different. This was a mystery that seemed to pull him closer with every heartbeat. Jack followed the princess through a winding corridor, lit by strips of emerald light. The air smelled faintly of heated stone and strange herbs. Guards marched behind them in perfect rhythm, their armored boots clicking against the floor. He kept his eyes on the clear glass bottle still in her hand, the red liquid inside catching every glint of light like it was alive. They stepped into a smaller chamber, where the ceiling was low and the walls were covered with flowing patterns. The designs shimmered like they were breathing, changing shape when he looked at them too long. A single table sat in the middle of the room, and on it lay an assortment of alien artifacts. Lyrin placed the bottle down gently, as if it were something that could shatter with a thought. "This is more than a drink," she said, her voice low. "It is my blood, taken in a ritual that binds me to my people. It holds power both for healing and for destruction. In the wrong hands, it can burn worlds." Jack stared at the glowing red liquid, unsure if she was trying to scare him or warn him. Her words carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. Jack's instinct told him to ask questions, but her eyes dared him to remain silent. He knew politics well enough to understand that pressing her now could turn an already tense relationship into something deadly. Still, his curiosity burned. Why would she carry something so dangerous in plain sight? And why show it to him at all? A faint sound echoed through the chamber, like steel scraping stone. Lyrian's head turned sharply toward the door, her hand going to the hilt of a curved blade at her side. The guards tensed, and in seconds the sound grew louder. Jack felt a prickle along his neck. He had been in enough battlefields to know. When trouble was seconds away, the doors swung open and a Kralian soldier stumbled inside, his armor scorched and his breathing ragged. "They have broken the outer wall," he gasped. "The rebels are inside the city." Lyrian's jaw clenched, and she gave a quick command in her native language. 2 guards rushed out, their weapons drawn, while the rest formed a protective ring around her. Jack took a step forward, but one of the guards blocked him. "You will stay here," the alien growled. Jack's eyes flicked to the table where the bottle still sat, untouched. He could see the red liquid swirl inside, as if reacting to the chaos outside. Something told him this was not just a drink, or even a weapon. It was connected to her in a way he didn't yet understand. Lyrian moved toward him, her armor catching the dim light. "Do not touch it, human," she warned, her tone sharper now. "If you drink it, you will not be the same. It will bind you to me in ways neither of us can escape." Jack held her gaze, the weight of her words pressing against his thoughts. She was not afraid for herself, she was afraid of what he might become. The clash of steel and alien weapon fire drew closer. The chamber vibrated with the force of explosions outside. Lyrian's attention wavered for just a moment as she turned toward the door. In that moment, Jack's curiosity tipped into action. He reached for the bottle, feeling the cool glass in his hand, and lifted it toward his lips. He could hear her voice rise in a sharp cry, the sound cutting through the chaos like a blade. But his focus was on the taste already touching his tongue. It was warm, far warmer than any drink should be, and it carried a strange, pulsing energy that moved through him like a second heartbeat. His vision blurred for an instant, and when it cleared, everything in the room looked sharper, brighter, alive in a way he had never seen before. Lyrian's hand shot forward, but it was too late. Jack had already swallowed a mouthful of the red liquid. The taste was unlike anything he had known, rich, metallic, and strangely sweet. Heat spread through his body, coiling around his chest like a living force. His vision sharpened, and every sound in the room became clearer. The air itself felt thicker, as if filled with invisible threads pulling at him. "Fool!" Lyrian hissed, her voice low but shaking with fury. She grabbed his wrist, and the moment her skin touched his, the heat in his body surged. A wave of alien symbols flashed in his mind, too quick to understand yet impossible to forget. He gasped, but his grip on the bottle did not loosen. Her golden eyes burned into his, filled with a mix of anger and something else, fear. The guards around them shifted uneasily. They had seen something change in the human, though none of them spoke. Outside, the clash of battle roared louder, but Jack could no longer focus on the noise. His senses locked on Lyrian, her scent, her heartbeat, the faint glow beneath her skin. It was as if the drink had drawn an invisible line between them, connecting their minds and bodies. "What have you done?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp, but beneath it was an edge of uncertainty. Jack took a deep breath, trying to speak, but the words felt heavy on his tongue. He looked down at his hands and saw faint red lines glowing beneath his skin. They pulsed in time with his heartbeat, and for a moment, he thought he could feel her heartbeat too. Lyrian turned sharply to the nearest guard. "Seal the chamber," she ordered. The heavy doors slammed shut, locking them in. Her gaze returned to Jack. "You have crossed a line that cannot be undone. My blood is not a gift, it is a bond. You are part of me now, whether you want it or not." Jack's pulse quickened at her words. He did not know if this bond was power, curse, or both. The floor trembled as an explosion shook the palace. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and a faint crack appeared in one of the walls. Lyrian moved closer, lowering her voice. "Listen to me. You are not ready for what is coming. The rebels want this bond destroyed, and they will kill you to break it." Jack met her eyes, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of desperation. There, he wanted to ask why this bond mattered so much, but the pounding at the sealed doors cut him off. The metal groaned under repeated blows. Lyrian drew her curved blade, the edge glowing faintly. "Stay behind me," she said. Jack's instincts told him to refuse, but something in the drink's power made him hesitate. The connection between them felt like a tether pulling him in her wake. The door burst open with a deafening crack. Figures in dark, battered armor stormed in, their weapons aimed at both human and princess. Jack felt his muscles tense, but before he could move, Lyrian stepped forward in a blur of motion. Her blade cut through the air with precision, knocking weapons aside. The rebels shouted in rage, but their voices sounded distant to Jack's sharpened hearing. Then it happened. One of the rebels lunged toward Jack, and without thinking, his body moved faster than it should have. His hand caught the attacker's wrist before the blade reached him. The strength in his grip startled him. With a twist, he disarmed the rebel and sent him crashing to the ground. The energy from the red liquid still pulsed through him, urging him forward. When the last rebel fell, the room was silent except for the heavy breathing of those still standing. Lyrian looked at Jack differently now, her anger tempered by something else. "You fought like one of us," she said quietly. "That is the blood's will. It will change you. It already has." Jack didn't answer. His mind was still reeling from what he had done and what it meant for both of them. Jack stood still, his chest rising and falling as the last trace of the fight faded from the air. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the rush of something powerful running through him. The red glow under his skin pulsed steadily, and every beat seemed to sync with the golden light in Lyrian's eyes. It was no longer just his heartbeat, it was theirs, joined together in an unbreakable rhythm. Lyrian sheathed her blade with a smooth motion and stepped toward him. Her expression was guarded, but he could feel the weight of her attention. "You must understand," she said quietly, "what has happened cannot be undone. My blood will not leave you. Even if you live 100 years, it will still be there, shaping you, guiding you." Jack met her gaze, sensing no threat in her tone but an unspoken warning. The surviving guards moved quickly, dragging the unconscious rebels to the far side of the chamber. One paused to glance at Jack, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Jack ignored him. His mind was fixed on what Lyrian had said. Shaping him, guiding him. He wanted to believe she meant it in a way that would help him, but the thought of being bound to anyone human or alien gnawed at him. A deep rumble shook the floor again, and this time it did not stop. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. Lyrian's head snapped toward the doorway, her expression tightening. "The palace. Shields are failing," she said. "We have to move before the rebels bring the walls down." Without waiting for his reply, she strode toward a side passage lit by flickering blue lines. Jack followed, his steps quick to match hers. The passage was narrow, the walls made of a dark metal that absorbed the light. The further they went, the more the air seemed to hum with a low vibration. Jack's senses, heightened by the blood, picked up every shift in sound, every movement in the shadows. He could hear the distant rush of water far below them. They emerged into a large chamber, unlike any he had seen. Massive stone pillars rose to a ceiling carved with swirling patterns, and in the center stood a pool of the same red liquid he had drunk. It glowed faintly, the surface rippling, though there was no wind. Lyrian's steps slowed, and for the first time since he met her, she seemed uncertain. "This is the heart of my people," she said. "Here, the blood is taken in ritual. It is our strength, our memory, our life. By drinking from me, you have tied yourself to this place as much as to me." Jack walked closer to the pool, the glow painting his skin in a deeper red. He felt the pull again, that invisible tether linking him to something greater than himself. Suddenly, voices echoed from the far side of the chamber. A group of rebels stepped into the light, their leader holding a jagged blade that shimmered like heat waves. "So it's true," the leader said, his voice cold. "The human carries the princess's blood. Kill him, and the bond will break." Jack's body tensed, but before he could move, Lyring placed herself between him and the rebels. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice steady. The rebels laughed, fanning out to surround them. Jack felt the same strange energy surge through him again, urging him forward. He had no weapon, yet he could sense the rhythm of their movements, the weight of their steps, the moment before. Each strike. The bond was not just strength, it was awareness. The first rebel lunged, and Jack moved without thought. He sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's arm, and twisted until the blade fell. His movements were faster, sharper than before, and each time he struck, he felt the bond's power flowing through him. Lyring fought at his side, their movements perfectly in sync, as if they had trained together for years. The rebels fell one by one until only silence remained in the chamber. Jack and Lyring stood among fallen rebels while the red pool glowed like a living heart. Jack wiped dust from his face and felt a steady pulse under his skin. It answered a quieter rhythm that he now knew was hers. The sound grew louder when she moved closer. He understood then that distance no longer meant freedom. Distance only stretched a cord that would not break. A new tremor rolled through the chamber, and cracks spread across the carvings. Lyring looked up with tight focus, and then looked back at the pool. She told him the foundations were under attack. He listened and felt a second message inside the words. The blood wanted them to move as one body. It wanted them to protect the source before all memory was erased. The remaining guards arrived with a wounded elder carried on a sling. The elder's armor was blackened, and his breathing was hard. He stared at Jack with pain and warning in his eyes. He said the rebels had a device that could sour the pool and end the line of queens. He said the device was set to trigger when the palace shields failed. Jack asked where the device was hidden, and the elder pointed toward a shadowed stair. Lyring reached for her blade and then stopped. Jack felt the same pause in his own chest. The bond tugged at both of them with a clear answer. They would have to go together. If they split, the rebels would use the gap between them like a knife. They moved down the stair while the guards formed a ring around the pool. The steps were wet and cold, and the air tasted of iron. Jack could see narrow vents that carried faint red mist. He felt stronger with each breath, yet also more aware of the cost. Power was never free. Power always took a price from the hands that used it. At the base of the stair they found a low tunnel lined with pale stone. Strange vines clung to the walls and pulsed with a slow light. Lyring touched one and pulled back with a small hiss. She said the vines remembered every queen and every oath. They would not allow a lie to pass. Jack felt the truth of her words. Like heat in his blood. A rebel voice shouted from the dark ahead, and then a metal crate slid into view. A dull red indicator blinked through a grate. The rebel raised a rifle and fired, but Jack saw the shot before it came. He pulled Lyring aside, and the bolt carved a bright line in the stone. They answered as one. She knocked the rifle away, and he drove the crate toward open ground. The crate was heavy and hot, and Jack's hands burned as he pushed. Lyring sliced the hinges and gas rushed out. The indicator flashed faster, and a sharp whine filled the tunnel. Jack felt the bond surge like a wave, and a pattern rose in his mind. He followed the pattern with quick hands and clear breath. He twisted two rods and lifted a shield plate free. Beneath the plate, a crystal trembled against a coil. The wine rose to a thin scream and then faltered. Jack pressed the crystal to the floor, and Lyrine set her palm over his. Heat met heat, and the sound died. The indicator went dark, and the crate sagged against the stone. Jack looked up and saw relief in her eyes, and also a quiet fear he did not yet know how to name. More rebels rushed the tunnel, and the fight began again in the tight space. Jack moved faster than before, and Lyrine struck with clean force. They did not speak because they did not need to speak. Every step fit the next step, and every turn matched the next turn. When the last rebel fell, the vines on the wall brightened, and the path to the chamber opened like a breath held too long. The chamber felt different when they returned. The red pool no longer pulsed in calm waves. Instead, it churned with ripples that shimmered under the broken light from above. Jack could feel it calling to him, not with words, but with a pull deep in his bones. Lyrian's hand brushed his arm, and the pull grew stronger. The bond was not quiet anymore. It was demanding. The guards had sealed the main doors, but muffled noise echoed from the outer halls. The rebels were regrouping. Jack looked at the cracks in the walls and knew the fight was not finished. Lyrine spoke quickly with the elder, her voice firm and steady. The elder's gaze moved between them, and then he nodded with a heaviness that told Jack this next step carried great risk. Lyrine turned to him. She explained that the bond gave him the right to stand in the right of blood alongside her. Together, they could awaken the oldest power of her people. It could crush the rebellion in moments, but it would change them both forever. Jack listened in silence, weighing her words. He had come here for peace talks, not ancient rites of war. The elder began preparing the ritual space around the pool. Guards placed carved stones in a wide circle, each marked with glowing runes. The air thickened with the scent of burning herbs. Lyrine stepped onto a narrow ledge beside the pool and motioned for Jack to join her. The glow from the liquid painted their faces in the same deep red, making them look like two parts of a single shape. She told him to kneel and place his hands in the pool. The liquid was warmer than blood, wrapping around his fingers like living silk. He felt it flow up his arms in threads of heat. When Lyrine placed her hands in the pool opposite his, the heat doubled and their breathing cinched without effort. His vision blurred, but instead of darkness, he saw flashes of her life, moments of victory, moments of loss, moments of choice. The sound of battle roared closer. Rebels pounded against the sealed doors. Jack wanted to pull away, but Lyrian's eyes held him in place. She whispered a phrase in her language, and the liquid flared brighter. The runes on the stones rose like firelight, spinning faster until they formed a ring of heat around them. The pounding on the doors turned into shouts of alarm from the other side. Power surged through Jack's body. His heart felt like it was beating in time with the pulse of the planet itself. He could feel the positions of every guard, every rebel, even the cracks in the palace walls. The bond was no longer a connection between two people, it was a bridge to everything around them. Lyrian's voice echoed in his mind, not as sound but as thought. "This is the blood's gift," she told him. "But it will demand its price." He did not answer in words. His thoughts reached back to hers, steady and certain. He was ready to pay if it meant stopping the rebels. He felt her acceptance, and then they both pushed the power outward. The red glow burst from the pool and raced through the palace in streams of light. The doors flew open, not from force, but because the rebels themselves were thrown back. Weapons fell from their hands. Some dropped to their knees, unable to move under the weight of the power pressing down on them. Jack rose from the ledge, the liquid dripping from his fingers in bright trails. Lyrine stood beside him, her armor glowing with the same deep red that now marked his skin. Silence followed. The few rebels still conscious looked at him with fear and disbelief. Lyrine spoke to them, her voice carrying across the chamber without effort. She told them the bond could not be broken, and that the human now stood as her equal under the law of the blood. The rebels lowered their heads, and Jack understood that this was not just victory, it was the start of something that would change both their worlds. Lyrine ordered the guards to bind the remaining rebels and clear a path to the outer halls. Jack watched the red glow fade slowly from his hands as the rush of power eased. His breathing settled and the world returned to normal speed. The elder studied him in silence and then bowed his head in a small sign of respect that surprised everyone. News of the failed attack reached the city in waves. Crowds gathered at the palace edges and waited for a signal that the day was safe. Jack could feel their worry like soft pressure under the skin. Lyrine walked beside him with steady steps while messengers ran to every gate. She did not raise her voice, yet the palace moved with her rhythm. They met the council in a vaulted room shaped like a half circle. Pillars rose like trees, and the floor showed a map of the land in thin lines of light. Some counselors looked at Jack with open distrust. Others hid curiosity behind still faces. Lyrine told them what had happened and why the rebels had tried to poison the pool. One counselor stood and declared that a human could never be part of the rite. Another said the bond was a sign from the ancestors to end old fears. The debate rose and fell like a storm tide. Jack kept his voice calm whenever they questioned him. He said he had come to stop a border war, and that promise had not changed. The elder stepped forward and placed a carved stone on the map. The stone pulsed. Red and shaped new lines across the floor. He said the rebels were not alone, and that a war leader outside the city was gathering more fighters. He said the bond had forced the war leader to rush the plan. They still had a chance to end it without burning the land. A young guard entered with a sealed case and knelt before Lyrine. She opened it and lifted a thin circlet made of pale metal. The elder called it the Circle of Memory. When worn by the bonded pair, it could share truth without tricks. Lyrine placed the circlet on her brow and nodded for Jack to take the other end. He felt a gentle pull as it settled. Images crossed between them like breath on glass. Jack saw the path of her training and the weight of each promise she had sworn. Lyrine felt the shape of his life as a soldier and a negotiator, and the small fear he carried, that power could change a good man into a hard one. The council watched in silence as the circle glowed and then faded. A scout arrived with news from the hills. The war leader held a ridge above the river and had taken hostages from the farms nearby. Lyrine's jaw set with quiet resolve. Jack felt the same resolve settle inside him like a stone. They would go to the ridge and offer a choice. Lay down arms and face judgment, or strike and face the blood made strong. Before they left, Lyrine stood by the red pool and dipped a small blade into the liquid. She touched the blade to Jack's palm and then to her own. The sting was sharp and clean, and the blood sealed like warm wax. The elder blessed them with a short line of old words. Jack did not know the language, but he understood the meaning well enough. They rode out at dusk on lean desert mounts, while a small guard unit followed at a distance. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and the first cool breath of night. Jack felt the land as if it were a living thing that held its own quiet voice. Lyrine pointed to the ridge where fires burned in a crooked line, and then looked at him with calm eyes that asked a simple question without sound. Asterisk. They reached the ridge as the fires crackled in the dry night air. The war leader stood at the highest point, a tall Kralian with armor scorched from past battles. His eyes locked on Lyrine first, then shifted to Jack with sharp hatred. Around him, hostages knelt under guard, their faces pale under the flicker of flame. Jack felt the bond hum inside him like a warning drum. Lyrine dismounted with quiet grace and walked forward until she stood a few paces from the war leader. She told him the rebellion was over, the poison had failed, and the blood had chosen its path. The leader laughed and raised his blade. He said the old ways would die before he bowed to a human. Jack stepped beside her and met the leader's gaze without flinching. The guards holding the hostages shifted uneasily as the red glow spread from Jack's skin to Lyrian's armor. The war leader's sneer faltered for a moment, but he steadied himself and shouted an order. His fighters moved to attack, yet their steps slowed as if weighed down by unseen chains. Jack felt the bond flare, sending a wave of force across the ridge. Weapons dropped from rebel hands. Some stumbled to their knees, gasping as if the air had thickened. Jack and Lyrian moved forward together. The war leader swung his blade in. A heavy arc, but Jack caught the strike with his bare hands. The heat from the bond surged into the metal, and the weapon shattered like brittle glass. Silence fell except for the crackle of fire. Lyrian told the rebels they had one chance. Lay down arms and live under the law of the blood, or be cast out to the wastes. No one spoke for a long moment. Then, one by one, the fighters let their weapons fall. The hostages were released, rushing down the slope toward the safety of the guard line. The war leader stood alone, his chest heaving. He looked at Jack with something between rage and disbelief. "You are not one of us," he said, his voice shaking. Jack stepped closer, the bond wrapping around every word he spoke. He told the leader that the blood was not about race or birth, it was about will, and his will was stronger than the rebellion's fear. The leader's eyes lowered, and he dropped to one knee. The ridge grew quiet as the rebels were led away. Under guard. Lyrian turned to Jack, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she gave a small nod. "You have walked in our blood and not been broken," she said. "Now you carry it into the future." Jack felt the weight of those words settle on him, heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. They returned to the city at dawn. The streets filled with people who bowed as they passed, their voices lifting in songs Jack did not understand, but could feel in his bones. The elder met them at the palace gates and placed his hand on both their shoulders. He said the bond had saved the city and would be remembered for generations. Jack felt the truth of it as if the blood itself spoke. Later, in the quiet of the council chamber, Lyrian asked him if he would stay. Jack looked out at the towers, the glowing spires, and the people walking below. He thought of the path that had brought him here and the bond that had changed him forever. He told her he would stay, not as a conqueror or a guest, but as one who now belonged to this place. The twin suns rose higher, bathing the palace in light. Jack and Lyrian stood at the balcony, their hands resting on the carved stone rail. The bond was quiet now, not demanding, just present, a thread tying two lives together. In that stillness, Jack knew that whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them as one. The blood had chosen, and so had they.